the issues at stake are about who is able to lie to the public, who is above the law requiring that the public gets access to the truth. I've been really taken aback by how exciting the whole story of Hillsborough Law's journey through Parliament has been, and that's a story that is still far from finished. But now is a really important point for us to reflect on all the drama that has already unfolded, because this is a story that began nearly 10 years ago, because Hillsborough Law was originally introduced by Andy Burnham in 2017 to Parliament when Andy Burnham was still an MP. And it was introduced as the Public Authority Accountability Bill. It was called the Hillsborough Law. But even though that bill had cross-party support, there was a general election called in 2017, and Andy Burnham at that time decided to leave Westminster, and he stood for election as Mayor of Greater Manchester. Theresa May won that election, and there was no room for Hillsborough Law. And then what did we get? Boris Johnson and the dramas of COVID. But all the time in the background, those campaigners, the families who'd been affected, not only those who were affected by Hillsborough, but also the families of those affected by many, many other state cover-ups, continued to campaign and lobby and build support. In 2023, Keir Starmer, who was now the leader of the Labour Party, had been to the Labour Party conference in Liverpool and had said, if I am elected to government, I will deliver the Hillsborough Law. And so when Labour were elected, on a landslide in terms of the number of seats they won, it was clear that at that time they could push through any legislation that they wanted. They had that majority in the House of Commons, and they had promised that they would introduce the Hillsborough Law. The King makes a speech at the opening of every parliamentary session, and the King said that his government was going to introduce a Hillsborough Law. Listen, a Hillsborough Law, not the Hillsborough Law. And that change in wording made the campaigners really nervous. But at the Labour Party conference in 2024, Keir Starmer once again came to Liverpool, and he promised the city, the country, that he would introduce a bill, and it would be done before the next anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster. But then, nothing. By the time 2025 came, there were briefings in the press from anonymous sources in Whitehall claiming that the Hillsborough Law would be unenforceable. It was unworkable. It would mean that nobody could tell a little white lie about the bus being late and they were late for work if they worked in a public authority. And finally, when under pretty secret conditions, a select few people, including Andy Burnham and the legal counsel representing the Hillsborough Law Now campaigners, saw what the government was proposing, they were shocked. There was no duty of candour whatsoever in what was being proposed. And campaigners went into that anniversary period in 2025 feeling very let down, without knowing what the government was going to do, but being very clear that what had been proposed was not the Hillsborough Law and they would not support it. There were negotiations ongoing, but the idea of the bill had essentially stalled, and the stakes were getting increasingly high because as the summer moved on, the prospect of the Labour Party conference coming round again in late September of 2025 began to appear. Would Keir Starmer actually come to Liverpool in a position where what he'd promised the year before had not happened, that he hadn't delivered a bill? It was a really significant political opportunity to push forward. Ian Byrne decided to make a move. He decided to introduce the original text of the bill that Andy Burnham had proposed back in 2017 as a private member's bill. And it was designed as a political move to increase pressure on the government and to draw the press's attention. By the time Parliament returned after the summer break, a new bill was presented to Parliament at first reading by David Lammy. Margaret Aspinall introduced the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, at the Labour Party conference in 2025, and Hillsborough Law was presented to the public, to the press, and to delegates at the Labour Party conference, almost as though it had already happened. But there was one issue outstanding in particular, which was about the role of the security services and their responsibilities to have to be candid at inquests and inquiries, just like any other public authority. And the campaign say that they were assured by the government that this issue would be ironed out. So after the Labour Party conference, the bill went to second reading, and it was supported by the House of Commons, and it went to the committee stage. And Hillsborough Law campaign believed that MPs at the committee stage would debate amendments that would improve the bill. In one part of the bill, it said that the security services were covered by the duty of candour and assistance, just like any other public authority. But at the back of the bill, there was a carve-out for the security services, which essentially meant that the duty of candour and assistance would not apply to individuals in the security services, and that the accountability to the organisations themselves was much diluted in comparison to other public authorities. And the bill, as it was presented to the committee, would not have prevented MI5 from covering up their mistakes as they had done at the Manchester Arena terror attack. But the Manchester Arena families wanted to talk to the Prime Minister. They secured a meeting on the same day that the bill was going to be at report stage and debated in the House of Commons. What then happened was the Prime Minister decided that they would delay the report stage of the bill to allow him to listen to the voices of the families affected by the Manchester Arena terrorist attack. And that created expectations and hope that the bill would be amended and the security service carve-out would come to an end. The Manchester Arena families met with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister listened, but he told them that he'd gone as far as he thought that he could. After that meeting, the campaign group united in solidarity and said if this bill does not meet the needs of all the different campaign groups in our campaign, we are not going to support it. What has happened subsequently as a result of that show of solidarity is that the government has withdrawn the bill entirely in order to allow new time for negotiation to take place about the security service carve-out. And that's the position we are in at the moment. Negotiations are ongoing, and the stakes could not be higher. The issues at stake are about who is able to lie to the public and the ability of the public to demand the truth from the state, from across all public authorities. Everything now hangs on a single question. Who is above the duty to be candid and accountable at inquests and inquiries? Who is above the law requiring that the public gets access to the truth?